Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, the podcast for financial professionals, small business owners, and busy people like you. My name's David Peters, and it is my pleasure to be with you here this week. I hope that everybody's doing well. I hope that you're having a great week so far. I think that a lot of us at this point, especially if you're in the CPA profession, you've heard about the pipeline problem. We've sort of it's been something that has been kind of beaten to death, I think. A lot of organizations, the AICPA, state CPA societies, podcasters like me, and several other folks have been talking a lot about all of the issues that CPAs are having just getting new people into the profession. And I think, though, that, while it is a problem that we do need to deal with. I mean, because our future depends on it, literally, our future depends on it. The fact is that sometimes I think that we're focusing in a little bit too much on kind of the quick fix and not really focusing in on the problem itself, which is trying to create thriving and better organizations, focusing in on the things that we are doing within the organization itself, and also how do we actually go through and hire the right people. I think that all of those things, I think, are important things that maybe we need to take a fresh look at. And my guest this week is going to help us do that because Karl Ahlrichs is a speaker, speaks all over the place. He's also a senior consultant at Gregory and Appel, and talks a lot about human resources, ethics. And I think, Karl, as we were talking about kind of before we hit the record button here, I think you have a very fresh take on a lot of these things, and I'm sure that our listeners are gonna love hearing about it. So, Karl, thank you for being on Accountable, and welcome.
Well, thank you. And I would rather you say that I'm an HR professional who's bilingual in accounting. Oh, and sometimes he speaks.
Okay. All right. So there you go, folks.
My point is a lot of the people out there who cast themselves as, content experts, that's all they do is research and present. I'm in the trenches with clients where I'm doing. Yep. And so a lot of what you and I will talk about today comes from something that happened last week at a firm, as opposed to a book that I read a year ago.
You know what, Karl, I am very glad you said that, because I think that a lot of times, I think that we can kind of get sort of bogged down in kind of the numbers and the research and things like that. And, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I'm a professional. I work with clients, and I do think that makes a huge difference. And so, one of the things that I think intrigues me about you is you have this concept. You talk a little bit about this idea of next practices, not best practices. And I love this idea. Right. And because I think for a lot of us, we're like, oh, well, we just need to look for the best practice, and that's going to help us, be better at what we do. And so talk to me about the difference there, and kind of what does that mean to you?
Well, let me start with the punchline and work backwards from there. Best practices are obsolete. What we shouldn't say to internal teams, external clients is, let's find out the best practices and let's go do that. That was great in the 80s and 90s. It worked. It actually grew out of manufacturing operations where they were doing all these process improvements in Six Sigma and got into lean and there they would go out and look for somebody in a parallel industry that was doing something clever, and they would bring it back and apply it to their world and implement it. Well, how long did that take from the time you started to go look for best practices to the time that you implemented them? I don't know, year and a half, maybe two.
Right.
And here's my point. By the time you implement a best practice, it's probably obsolete. But in today's world where things are moving at a much faster shelf life, we're working in internet years, where when I grew up, a year took a long time.
Right.
As I work with clients who have a new service, they have a new product, something they're releasing, its shelf life is significantly shorter. Everything is happening faster, and best practices don't work in that framework because you're implementing something somebody else figured out and you're adapting it, and you may get some immediate benefit from it, but it's already, you're essentially driving looking in somebody else's rearview mirror. Here's what you should do. Figure out where your organization should go next and go there. And so I'm at a firm that we're launching some things that nobody else is doing. Some of them may fail, but we need to get there first. Right. And there's some benefit to failing first because you figured out, okay, that one didn't work, but these other two did.
Right.
Let me talk hardware for a second.
Yeah.
Everybody has one or two iPads laying around their house. That was not Apple's first touchscreen handwriting recognition device. Anybody remember what the name of the first one was? Because they only sold about 10 of them, from what I can tell. Apple Newton. Okay. Now, and see, focus groups are a great home. You know, let's get with the focus group and think up a new process we can sell to our clients. Well, the clients don't really know. They often can't articulate what they need. You need to figure it out, show it to them, and then they can say yes or no. Those are next practices where we're looking at generative AI and figuring out how we can implement this new tool in ways that will please and delight our clients, and show it to them once we figure that out, instead of asking the client, okay, there's this new magical thing that does all of these amazing, wonderful things. What would you like us to do with it? Yeah. Well, let's go study what other people are doing with generative AI. You can't, because they haven't figured it out either.
Right.
And worse yet, the case law that determines the copyright of what comes out of these engines hasn't been determined either. Yeah. So it's very much, we're in a world where we have launched a boat or taken off in an airplane while it's still under construction. Right. We're building the boat as we float.
So I think that what you seem to be saying, or at least what I believe I'm hearing, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that best practices, it's not wrong to look for the best way to do something. What's wrong is that by the time that you get to what the best practice is, it's already done. And so therefore we need to be kind of looking more forward rather than just looking around us trying to figure out what other people are doing.
Right. And asterisk, we in accounting and finance are more likely to do best practices because it's safer, and we by nature are risk managers for ourselves and for our clients. You know, the old joke, how does an accountant change a tire on a car? The same way they did it last year.
Yeah, right. Sally, right? Same as last year. Sally.
There you go. And we're in a world where for accounting and finance to be sustainable, we are providing the data to guide our organizations or our clients. So their data needs are going to be significantly different. We need to anticipate that and have the metrics and the guidance ready to go when they're sitting in their strategic planning session and saying, well, you know, that's true up until COVID. Mm-hmm. Now it's not that way. What should we be looking at?
So do you think that accountants and CPA firms, do you think that that they're automatically being pushed into kind of this new world? Because you're right. I mean, I think accountants by nature, I mean, we are made we're I think we're rule followers. I mean, I think we tend to kind of stay in our own lane. I think
Well,
that's
and our regulations that the
right.
AICPA is very good at reminding us we have to follow keep us in our lane.
Hmm.
Asterisk. We have expanded our roles to be more than just, I mean, granted, you got to have a good tax department. Granted, you got to have a good, the core accounting functions departments. Many of our listeners are being seen as the trusted advisor, and they need to be providing data to guide the client companies and the firm itself into a world where they are more consultative, where they are more of a business partner than just a business support function.
Rather than just cranking out the deliverable, they actually have to be an advisor, I
Well,
mean,
that's the advisor stuff. If you talk to strategic planning geeks, that is a correct term. The the money to be made is in these expanded functions, because the core functions have been around since the Renaissance. The Italians invented double entry accounting, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
That's a crucial business function. I mean, our commerce relies on a clean audit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will never go away. But the growth area is going to be in some of these new services.
Well, and I think you've seen some of this happen. I mean, we're talking about it, I think, more now. I think just because I think CPA firms in general are kind of struggling to kind of keep doing I think a lot of CPA firms, they want to keep doing what they've always done, and now they're struggling. But we've seen this evolution. I mean, this is not kind of a new thing where a CPA firm is trying to expand in other areas where they are doing consulting. CAS is kind of the new term right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say that that's kind of been more of an evolution, not necessarily a new thing that just sort of popped up, post COVID.
Right. Well, and I've seen it happen, and what I have seen happen is it's generally client driven, tail wagging the dog, where the client says, here's what I really need to know from you guys.
Right.
Can you provide this, or do I go find someone else?
Yeah.
And then they turn and they find a seasoned partner who's on the cusp of heading to Fort Myers and more golf and rum drinks, and saying, hey, could you take on this challenge? And that senior partner has more than the knowledge of the firm. He has wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's where a fresh idea can be born, because the senior partner can see a little bit outside the box. Oh, quick CFO joke.
Yeah, go for it.
I facilitate a CFO roundtable. And I talked about this out of the box thinking, and one of my participants raises his hand and says, Karl, this is all very nice about outside the box, but don't you understand that when you say you're thinking outside the box, you're just thinking in a slightly larger box.
That's good. That's good.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. There's probably a some sort of philosophical explanation for that there too. But
I read about brain function. I teach courses on critical thinking that involves a lot of brain function. It runs along with the CPE I teach on ethics, where in addition to behavioral ethics, I will talk about how the brain does make difficult decisions. And so I have become a brain chemistry person. Who knew?
I was going to ask you, so how does this kind of next practices idea, how does that translate into hiring? Because I think that, a lot of people are, a lot of firms are really struggling right now with kind of how to hire. But I think that that's got to be somehow related to where you think that the firm's going to go next.
Yep.
Is that right?
Totally. Two things. First, and since this is a podcast and people have short attention spans, here are some punchlines.
There you go.
Figure out who your high performers are. And the high performers are the ones that generally have the personal flexibility to go in a new direction. And keep them.
Yeah.
So a big part about future hiring is going to be not having to hire because you've kept all your high performers. Okay. I was on the HR teams of several organizations that realized they had to change direction to survive. And they did wholesale layoffs and wholesale hiring. And they hired the people that had the new skills. Case in point, I was alive in year 2000 when the IT departments were doing wholesale transition from Fortran and machine language coding of old school stuff and moving into structured programming languages. And so they were rather than retrain the old dogs and teach them new tricks, they hired new dogs. Okay, fine. They could change faster that way, but they lost their culture. So,
yeah,
I worked and saw that happen. Here's a key piece of advice for today. Keep your high performers. And let me tell you how to do it. Armed with an Excel spreadsheet, not spending much money, let me tell you how to do it. And the punchline to my advice is stop ignoring them. With some structured communication practices. Here's why I say that. I mean, Dave, if you and I were to stop the podcast right now and go across the street and you and I would sit down with the supervisory team of a mid-sized privately owned accounting firm or an accounting department inside a mid-sized company, we ask those supervisors, we put up a distribution curve on the wall. And ask those supervisors, here's low performers, here's the mid-pack, here's high performers. So let's put numbers on it because your audience is numbers people. We've got 20 people in the department. That means standard deviations from the mean. We're going to have 3 people that are low performers, 14 people that are mid-pack, show up every day, work hard, don't hurt you, and then 3 high performers that are awesome. Okay. Let's look at the productivity of those people. Pew Research did a look at productivity of those slices of the workforce. And they found, and I find this is true, they found that the 16%, the 3 people of the high-performing class produced more than half of the output of the whole 20-person group. That group produced around 60% of the goods, services, goodwill, whatever. So they're crucial. They're the ones you got to keep because they are outperforming everyone else and generally getting along doing it, and they enjoy their jobs.
Right.
Okay. If we ask those supervisors, where do you spend your time? Point to those 3 groups. They will all point to the low performers and say, oh, man, here. Some in the middle pack.
Right.
But none of them spend time with the high performers. Why? Well, Dave, tell me why. Why don't they spend time with high performers?
Because they're not a problem that needs to be fixed, right?
I mean, they're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. So
I don't
why
want to
spend time with
micromanage them.
Right. I think that that's an excellent point. I mean, because, because the other thing is, too, is that would seem to me that that's probably going to lead to burnout because you do have these folks that are producing very highly and they're feeling sort of underappreciated,
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, they aren't that prone to burnout, in my experience, because, have you ever noticed if you want something done, give it to a busy person?
Yeah, that's true.
And high performers. All right, I've got a pad of paper here, Dave, with the power vested in me by this pair of scissors. Dominic. You are a high performer.
Right.
What motivates you? Give me a couple words that motivate you. Go.
It's probably the work itself, the
Okay.
ability to achieve,
Achievement.
and also just the thought that I might be able to do something more within the firm that I'm working at. I mean, if I'm pretty happy.
I hear you say maybe the challenge.
Yeah, the challenge. Sure.
Notice what you didn't say. You didn't say money.
Right.
Are high performers long-term motivated by cash? No,
probably not. I mean, and I would also say too, just kind of, Carl, and I'm sorry for interrupting. I think that, from my own experience too, most of the time when I have somebody who is saying, things like, "Hey, I'm going to leave unless you give me X number of dollars." Most of the time, I mean, if you give it to them, you're just sort of, it's a Band-Aid on something much larger.
Right. High performers are motivated by things that only come from, and here's the punchline, they only come from a quality relationship from a boss they respect.
Yeah, that's true.
And think about yourself.
Yeah.
All through your life, were there occasional jobs where you would stay there forever because of the boss?
Absolutely. 100%.
And it wasn't the money, was it?
Nope.
Okay, here's my main point. Be that boss to the high performers, so don't ignore them. So I want to give your listeners a quick tip that I got from one of my favorite. He's a lapsed CPA, but he was my favorite boss. His name's Harlan Schaefer. He's still being a great boss at Professional Staff Management. He never lost any people he didn't want to lose. And I mean, you don't want to retain everybody. There are some people that don't have a good job fit. I mean, Dave, have you ever been someplace where there was somebody who was terminated and morale went up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You got the right one. Fine. What Harlan did was brilliant. And I want to share it as a quick example of how to stop the turnover of high performers by doing something intentional that doesn't cost any money. Harlan always had, now for those of everybody listening, I'm holding up a trifold sheet of paper, a folded sheet of paper, single piece of paper. And Harlan had this piece of paper in his sport coat pocket, and he was always fiddling with it and writing something on it back in his pocket. And after a couple of years of working there, I called him on it. What's that? And he pulled it out, and it was an Excel spreadsheet that he explained was the reason he was the boss, and this spreadsheet was the reason that we never lost good people. Tell me how it works. Okay, every Monday morning he would print it. It had 4 columns. It had, the first column was everybody's name that was important to him or was an employee. He had about, 35, 40 names on it. All of his 31 direct reports and a couple clients, and I think there were some family names down there. Okay, fine. Second column was labeled dialect and what, or something like that, but it was, how did that person prefer to communicate? Were they an agenda person? Were they a fairness and values person? Were they somebody who wanted to talk about the personal side of things? Were they straight to business? Just a clue as to how they preferred to communicate. Third column. What were they interested in outside of work? F-150 pickups.
Right.
Cats. It's never just one cat. Grandchildren, whatever. But just what was their personal, who were they as a human, if you will?
Right.
And then every Monday morning, that fourth column was blank. And he would keep score on touching base once a week with everybody on his list. This way, he didn't skip any high performers. This is intentional communication that builds trust, that has a channel. Everybody knew that sometime during the week, they were going to get a brief one-on-one chat with the boss, and that it was a safe space to bring stuff up.
Now, were these like formal chats, or was it kind of a mix of kind of informal and formal? Or
if it became Friday and he hadn't gotten to you yet, it was formal. I mean, he would find you and reach out and say, we got to talk.
I see.
The talk itself was relatively short, minute or two, unless there was something big. But it was basically, how was your weekend? How's your truck? How are your cats? And then he would embed an open-ended question that was the meat of the matter. Something like, is there anything I should know? Wow. No, we're fine. Okay. Yes, actually there is. In last week's staff meeting, you made a flip remark that stepped on my toes. I felt uncomfortable. I know you didn't mean anything by it, but understand that that was an important issue to me, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that again. Wow. To have somebody say that, what a gift. Because a lot of times, and nowadays, with everybody's sensitivities dialed way up and all sorts of issues as landmines sitting around, this enables what would happen if that didn't exist? The high performer who got their toes stepped on. Okay, let's go back to this meeting. Okay, first off, you get it about that's all I wanted to say about the sheet of paper.
Yep.
And you can do it at whatever rate you want. You can do it with whatever questions you want, but just do intentional communication in a way. If you have to prioritize, do it with the high performers, because those are the ones you got to keep. Okay, let's go back to that meeting where somebody got toes stepped on, because that plays into this. Somebody has different dietary preferences, and somebody makes a snarky remark about vegans, and people laugh because it's funny, but the person who's the vegan isn't laughing.
Yeah.
Okay, this might be the last straw. Okay, and that vegan has three options. First option: say something, put their hand up, say this is creating a toxic work environment, talk to HR, have an investigation, have the offender told, you don't make fun of vegans. Option number two: say nothing and just seethe about it. Pull back, not be as productive, get burned out. Okay. And that's somebody who doesn't leave, but they're not present.
Yeah.
There's absenteeism where people are absent, and then there's presenteeism where people leave and they're present. And that will quickly destroy a high-performing team. What's option three? They quit.
Yeah.
And on the way out in the exit interview, my experience is they are not truthful about why they're leaving. They'll say it's the money. Okay, and you'll always be puzzled as to why they left. Well, it's because you weren't talking to them. You weren't listening to them.
The traditional way of hiring is like, hey, I have this need. Let's go to the outside and let's try to find it.
Right.
You're saying that, don't forget about the folks that are internal, because there's certain folks that are right. critical, and that if you ignore them, you're in trouble, and your hiring needs are gonna it's gonna snowball.
No, that's a good point. And as people go through different stages in their life, their job fit requirements change.
Yeah.
When somebody's young, it's different than when they're mid-pack, as opposed to somebody with more experience. And so I work at Gregory & Appel. It's 180 people in an agency environment. Love the place. We're coming up on one of our all hands meetings, and during the year, generally between 5 and 10% of the organization changes roles.
Okay.
Either moving up, moving over, changing departments. I know some people that have been in 4 departments now. It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's because they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to have that flexibility to move from a client-facing role where they got some experience but learned they didn't really like that. Now they're in the financial analysis and data mining department, where they're there with all their friends, the numbers, and they don't have to talk to people all that much.
So when we do have to hire, then
yes,
I mean, what's the mindset then? I mean, because I mean, I don't get the sense that you're necessarily saying don't hire for skills.
No.
But you're saying that, that it goes a little bit deeper than that, and that not to overlook necessarily the high performers.
That's exactly right, David. You got it right. There are skill positions.
Yeah.
I do not want my dentist hired just because he's a nice person. Long-term job fit, where the employee is happy, the employer is happy, and the client's happy. Okay, that's good job fit. Hire for that. Hire for values, and skills are a secondary in general. Actually, let me give you a Starbucks experience.
Go for it,
Dave. What does Starbucks sell? Hint, it's not coffee.
Well, I mean, I think that they sell a nice place to go and sit and talk. Yeah.
Bingo. They sell a customer experience.
Big time.
Right. I worked with them. They redid their form. The Starbucks regional office was in our building, and I got to know these people. We redid their form, where it's an application for work. And it's back in the days when it was actually on paper. Anyway, start of it was normal. Where do you live? What's your phone number? How much you want to make, which they would always leave blank. Anyway, boom. The first thing we asked them after we got past the housekeeping was a values question. Here's the question we created. Describe in your own words the Starbucks customer service experience. Here's the magic. Somebody who can't do it can't describe it. Someone who can't describe it abandons the application form and goes across the street to the accounting firm where they don't ask that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Adapting that to an accounting concept. And wait a minute, Carl, we can't find enough people. You're telling me that I should put in screening to remove people from the process when I want to hire everybody? You don't want to hire everybody. Yeah. Because if you hire warm bodies who aren't a fit, it demoralizes the high performers you have to keep, and the high performers will quit. Let me repeat
well
that.
Said.
The high performers will quit if you don't do a good hiring job.
Right.
Because you're offending them by surrounding them with people that aren't better than they are. High performers want you to hire people better than they are so they can learn from them.
Yep.
Okay.
Well said.
Okay. Here's the values question I crafted with, I have an accounting firm that's a client that was in the lobby of our building, needed to hire a tax accountant. And so the first values question people would hit on the form was, what's fascinating to you about taxes? What's interesting to you about a 1040 form? And I had this applicant reply with, "Oh, it's like CSI forensics. I can reverse engineer everything a client did in a year of their life from a 1040 form. What they buy, what they sell, where they go, what they do. It's going to be in there." Wow. Here's somebody who loves 1040 forms. Hire them.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
see what we're getting at here? That's a good job fit question. You can also get it by asking, what's the best job you ever had? Why? What's the worst job you ever had? Why? Okay, so this is a client-facing reception job. And somebody says, "Oh man, worst job I ever had, working in a deli, talking to people."
Right.
Okay, maybe this isn't a fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so I
it's
think
also kind of interesting. I'm seeing some of the bigs. I think Deloitte maybe has in many areas removed the specific job postings and simply has an open funnel. You want to work at Deloitte? And I have to double check and make sure it's Deloitte that did this, but let's use them as an example.
Sure.
Because Deloitte, by and large, has some really amazing HR practices, and I'm very proud of them.
Yeah.
Where they just have a big funnel and said, "Come work for Deloitte, put your application in, not specifying a specific job." I mean, if they've got a specific job for a senior tax accountant, you can apply for that. That's fine. But if you just vaguely like to work for Deloitte, put your information in this funnel and we will help figure out where you should sit.
Yeah.
Cool.
So how does this, I mean, because I love what you're saying here. And I think that
then I like you. I like people that like me.
So, I mean, does this idea of kind of, again, you've laid out a few, I think, really important things, and I just want to make sure that people have heard it. We've talked about just kind of making sure that the folks that you're hiring are going to be in line and with the values,
with your values,
values. And also, too, making sure that they work well with your high performers, because we don't want to offend those high performers, because they're the ones that are really kind of,
right,
making sure that
they're hoping you will hire people smarter than them.
Yeah. And so does this build up, or I guess maybe I should start with, is there such a thing as kind of company loyalty these days?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think what you're talking about is really sort of building an organization that is going to not just be good for kind of the short term, it's going to be good for kind of the long term. But yet every statistic out there that we see, Karl, is about how fast people move and the Great Resignation and how, I guess the lack of loyalty overall to an organization.
Okay, let me give you first, I'm going to agree with you, and then I'm going to disagree with you.
Perfect.
I agree that people who are earlier in their life career path have a fear of missing out and tend to want to move faster than somebody who's further down the path on their career. Average length of tenure of a late boomer, 7-8 years. Average length of tenure of a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, 3 years. Okay, I get it. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. And if you do what I'm saying, you're going to slow everybody's changes and jumping ship down, I can guarantee, by 10, 15, maybe 20%. They're still going to do it, but the chances of them wanting to come back are much greater if they've had a good leadership supervisory experience, they've had a good personal development experience. At Gregory and Appel, we have people who have hit the upper level of what their development's going to be in this position, And, we had an intern, for instance, who wanted to work with us. And we said, hold it. We would love to hire you once you have gone and worked for the bigs as an underwriter.
Yeah.
I work in insurance.
Yep.
Go do that and come back. And yeah. And so we told them to leave for the right reasons and get some big firm experience. It's like, going and getting some Big Four audit, do 2 or 3 years in that and then come back, and we'd love to have you. These are the rules of this new world.
Yeah.
And it basically is get back to the basics. If you want to give a simple book to everybody in the firm or department that has a management role, go out to Amazon and buy a case of used copies of the 1 Minute Manager.
Okay, there you go,
get them
folks.
in hardcover for a couple bucks each. It's a simple read. It's a simplistic concept, and it's what's behind that piece of paper with intentional communication.
So is part of this also looking out for the development of the person, even if it costs you, a quality person at your firm?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's a hard one. I think especially right now. I mean,
Right.
I think especially for, financial firms that, to your point, I mean, a lot of them are just kind of looking for warm bodies. Not saying that that's the right way. I agree with you. I don't really think it is.
Right.
But it's hard when resources are scarce for you to say, maybe we are not the best for you, and maybe you should try something else.
Well, I wouldn't use that language exactly.
Okay.
I would be more next step, if you will, the next step in your career at this point isn't in these walls, but we want you back.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Because this is, okay, let's go back to your case of a somewhat disaffected 30-year-old who doesn't feel they're being properly developed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, they're leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you start developing them, they won't leave as soon, but they're probably still leaving.
Right.
Okay. Remember I said, if you do the stuff I'm describing, I can slow this down by say 15%.
Yeah.
Is that worth it? You have
Maybe
to decide.
not. Yeah.
You have to decide. But there's some ulterior stuff that's happening with that. As you're developing them and you're investing in them, high performers hang out with other high performers. Word spreads that your department is the cool department. Your department, your firm is the cool firm.
Right.
I go around and do CPE, and I'm in and out of a lot of firms and a lot of departments. And the very air is different in some. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's diverse. It's entrepreneurial. It can happen. Where does that come from? The boss. The boss gets it. Now, notice I am not talking leadership. Right. I'm talking supervisory skills. Leadership is, reading those good to great books, and there's a constant flow of fad leadership books coming out. I'm not talking that. I'm talking how to be a boss, how to listen, how to break up fights, how to fix broken people, how to make good work assignments.
Yeah.
It's my world is a more tactical world, which is why my core CPE that I teach is how to make difficult decisions, is ethics and critical thinking.
Which I think that a lot of what you're talking about, I think is very interesting and good things for I think especially for CPAs. Karl, we could probably talk. I mean, I think probably all day on this. In
I'm
fact, I'm
ready.
sure
I'm
we
going.
could. So
I actually
but
do. I do have an 8-hour ethics course.
there you go, folks. So if you do want to talk about this, so I think that especially that Karl would love to have you in one of his courses. But tell us if folks would like to get a hold of you, or if folks would like to see more of some of the work that you do,
Oh,
or would
sure.
like to take a CPE course. How
Yep.
would they do that?
Great. I'm easy to find because I have a weird name. AHLRICHS. It'll pop. I have a website, ExpertSpeaks.com. I am fortunate to be one of the thought leaders in the Business Learning Institute, which is a part of the AICPA. I'm a contributor to the AICPA. I do content development for them. For a long time, I did Chapter 7 in the Journal of Accountancy.
Yep.
But yeah, you can find me. And you're going to want to find me because of what I would like to close with is a scary thought. I'm a data nerd. No, I'm a data geek. I'm sorry. You know the difference between nerd and geek? Hygiene. A nerd is just a geek with a hygiene problem.
There you go.
The talent shortage is not going away, and I can prove it with data. The Great Resignation is not a post-COVID phenomenon. It started in 2008. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks voluntary quits in professional services, and it's been steadily climbing in a straight line since 2008. So this is not a new thing. We just didn't notice it. There was a dip while everybody was scared in COVID, but now it's back up and tracking again. Second, we have fewer people in the workplace. During COVID caused a blip. We had, 330 million people in the United States. You know, take away the young ones, take away the old ones, take away everybody in the military. I mean, it leaves us with a smaller pool of people. We had 2 million plus early retirements of boomers who bailed out during COVID. They were going to keep working. It just got untenable and they didn't want to learn Zoom. They're gone. Second, there were 1 million COVID deaths.
Right.
Also, there's not being tracked, but I think there's about 500,000 long-term COVID survivors who are not working. So we can't hire them. Then there's the whole issue people aren't looking at. A lot of people in accounting have a side hustle. They may be selling candles on the side, or they have a service business that they've started up that one of their kiddos is running. COVID-driven entrepreneurship spiked huge, and somebody who leaves your firm to start we had someone at our firm leave to start a personal trainer business because they were a fitness buff. Another person left, and I'm not making this up. He is now doing wildlife tours and wildlife guide in the Aleutian Islands because he was passionate about the outdoors. You can't hire them. They're off running their good news. They're running their own business. Bad news, you can't hire them. Then we've got layered on that the U.S. birth rate, ever since, by my figures, about the mid-70s, has dropped below the replenishing the worker line. And it's dropped even more significantly in the last year, where the message to a lot of people of childbearing age has been that healthcare isn't necessarily guaranteed. Yeah. And so we've got a birth rate decline on our hands that's going to cause problems for the next couple decades. And back to your point, and Dave, you pointed this out, young workers are less loyal. They are. Okay, add all those up. We've got these 5 subtractions, 2 ongoing, birth rate declines, young workers less loyal, and 3 brought on COVID-19, early retirements, COVID deaths, COVID-driven entrepreneurs. Add all that up. The firms that are going to be sustainable are the ones that implement the next steps in finding, by values, and keeping, by communication, good people.
I think that that's very well said, Karl. I really do. I think that you've given our listeners a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. Again, I love the stuff that you're doing because I do think that you really do have a fresh take on a lot of these issues that we are experiencing in finance and accounting.
And if anybody tracks me down, I am fully on your team, whoever you are, and happy to listen to what you're trying to do and give you some guidance if that's helpful. Or if you want me to come in, and I'll tell you something I also can do. There have been firms who have hired me to facilitate their annual partner strategy, the strategery meeting, the strategic planning meeting, the offsite with partners, because they want this addressed. And as a functioning HR person, and as a functioning person inside a company that works and all these clients, they can throw situations at me, and I've probably got an answer. And if I don't, I'll tell them.
There you go, folks. You can't argue with that. So anyway, Karl Ahlrichs, everybody. Karl, thank you so much for being on Accountable.
I enjoyed our chat. This is a good forum, and I congratulate you for doing it.
All right. Thank you so much.